If we can learn to harness the power of the immune system and get it to work at an optimal state, that's what I'm most excited about.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jose Navarro Betancourt, and I am the scientific director of quadraScope. We invest in early-stage healthcare companies that aim to dramatically extend human health span by treating the mechanisms of aging. And today, we have Agustín Fernández Santana on the call. He is the executive chairman of ADvantage Therapeutics, a quadraScope portfolio company developing treatments for aging and age-related cognitive impairment, including Alzheimer's disease. Agustín, thank you again for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Jose, and thank you for your support. The company, amazing. Thank you.
So, Agustín, why don't we begin with a brief overview of ADvantage's mission and pipeline?
Yeah, so ADvantage is primarily focused on Alzheimer's at a clinical stage, but the core of the company is the biology of aging. It's how we started the company. So we were always looking at functions that dysregulate when you age and how that affects the body and how it triggers different age-related diseases. The most prominent one for us was cognitive decline. You know, for us, not that the other ones are less serious, it's why I paused, but we really wanted to tackle that. And we had this molecule that had previous data from a phase 2 in Germany, really impressive data. In the phase 2 study that we looked at, we saw the hippocampus stop shrinking. It was amazing. So I was blown away by the data. I brought in Dr. Tanzi and Jeff, of course, Jeff Madden, who's our CEO. And we looked at this data together. And you know, we sat with Susan Hendricks, who was a statistician on the trial, who works at ADvantage now with ADvantage. And we all sort of agreed, and Dr. Tanzi confirmed that there really was nothing having this much of an effect in this sort of approach to tackling Alzheimer's disease, which is tackling the inflammation in the brain. And so we formed a company around that. We now have CTAs to do a phase 2/3 in 6 European countries, including Germany, France, and Austria, Poland as well. And we were really honored to have been granted a fast track designation in England, where we got it's called Innovative Licensing and Access Passport. It's given to one drug per indication in the United Kingdom. And it's for drugs that have a chance of going to market quickly and being available to patients quickly, that the agency believes have a chance of solving an unmet need. So ADvantage was granted that designation. In England, England is our anchor sort of sites. We have 3 sites in England engaged to begin that trial. And it is a pivotal trial. It's a phase 2/3. And if the endpoints of this trial match the endpoints of the previous phase 2, you know, the data matches, there's a possibility of going to market with this drug within 2 years. We are entering a pivotal trial, and patients could have access to this, you know, very safe compound, very easy to administer compound, and relatively inexpensive, very, very quickly. This is an adjuvant that's been used for 100 years. It's aluminum alhydrogel. We are administering it subcutaneously in the periphery, right? This is what got me excited when we talk about anti-aging. And then we're seeing this effect that's being triggered in the periphery infiltrate the brain and affect Alzheimer's patients positively. And we all thought, well, it must also be creating an anti-inflammatory response systemically. And immediately we were like, this is anti-aging, even our lead compound. Because if you're combating inflammation, you know, if you're triggering phagocytosis and clearing debris systemically, and that effect is going into the brain, then of course you help Alzheimer's patients. It also must be helping patients with inflammation and phagocytosis systemically. And we know systemically inflammation is an issue. And sure enough, when you look at alum, there's publications of alum in our arteriosclerosis. So they've done it in mice and in rats, and it does seem to help clearing oxidized lipids and arteriosclerosis. So it's very exciting to be able to point it in an effective, inexpensive way to Alzheimer's patients, a way that's easy to administer, that could be available to everybody in the world, right? And it's also interesting to start learning about, well, this systemic effect, you know, I see publications all the time and write-ups about the gut being tied to the brain, or, you know, the periphery being tied to the brain, and exercise helps Alzheimer's patients, and dancing helps Alzheimer's patients. And it makes perfect sense if you think the system works in tandem, right? It's all connected. And it really led us down the path to Clotho, right? Our next candidate. And I'm sorry to go off track. Whereas we seem that we can trigger these system-wide effects. In the case of alum, it specifically helps the brain, but it must be also helping the rest of the system. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. An important trend in Alzheimer's disease treatment development is that there's been a shift in the pipeline, moving into drugs that, instead of focus on removing beta amyloid plaques, they now focus on alternative mechanisms of disease, including metabolism and obviously inflammation. How does the AD04 product fit within this emerging trend to tackle Alzheimer's disease by alternative pathways independent from amyloid plaques?
Yeah, I think it sits right at the center. I mean, I think you hit the nail right on the head. Jeff, our CEO, always says it's like Intel, it's the chip inside. And the reality is, we think that no matter what other products are out there, having this in combination with everything else would still be good, because it's the basic core of triggering, you know, self-metabolism of you know, oxidized lipids, and triggering anti-inflammatory properties. So AD04 is such an elegantly simple molecule, right? That triggers these functions. It's exciting to see. We talked about it earlier. Like, they're just asking different questions. Okay, guys, we've been asking, and again, you know, the public gets frustrated. 40 years on amyloid plaque. It's not that long in science. It's not that long. They had to ask all those questions. Sadly, they had to learn it. And amyloid plaque really is a problem. It really is one of the problems, and maybe the main problem. And it's okay to ask other questions now too. So I'm excited to see that so many great people are asking other questions. And at the heart of that, I think, new movement towards looking at other factors that exacerbate the syndrome of Alzheimer's, I think at the heart of that is AD04. You know, it's very simple. You need to fight inflammation, and you need to get your metabolism regulated, not only to metabolize things you're ingesting, but to metabolize self molecules that need to be cleared away every day, cellular debris. I think AD04 will be there forever. Honestly, because it's so easy to administer, and it works so well in combination with other therapies. And we've seen it as an adjuvant in other vaccines for so long, Alan, that as new and more elegant things get developed to tackle, you know, Alzheimer's is probably triggered by several things. There's no one thing that's going to be the silver bullet for Alzheimer's. So it would be amazing to have, you know, what I think is the centerpiece, which is our AD04 compound, and have other compounds build on top of it, so we can get this combination therapy to really defeat that disease. But I think that's where we're going.
This is a good point to make a small summary. So AD04 is an immunomodulatory injection that modulates the immune system in the whole body. Yeah. And specifically in the brain, it favors the resolution of inflammation in the brain. This inflammation associated with the plaque deposition. I would like to take a moment to explain why Alzheimer's disease is the prototype of an age-related disease. In fact, the risk of Alzheimer's disease doubles every 5 years after the age of 65. And the molecular causes of Alzheimer's have significant overlap with the hallmarks of aging. Here, we have some hallmarks of aging listed on the left, and on the right, we see a list of the molecular causes of Alzheimer's according to the Common Alzheimer's Disease Research Ontology Classification, or CADRO. So it is evident that most of the causes of Alzheimer's are directly addressed by the hallmarks of aging. For example, loss of proteostasis, problems with cell communication in synapses, or dysregulated metabolism. Now, we will dive into chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation, as many of you are aware, is a hallmark of aging. And this is important because it means that multiple age-related diseases are related to this mechanism of aging. So in your opinion, what therapeutic areas could benefit the most from targeting inflammation, in addition to
Alzheimer's? Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a great question. I think everything, Jose, and that's a bad answer, but I'll tell you why. If we can learn to harness the power of the immune system and get it to work at an optimal state, that's what I'm most excited about. There's a time in most of all our lives when our immune system is so amazing that you're healing from injury quickly. You're protected from organ degeneration. You're protected from a neurodegeneration. You're not at risk of cancer. You're not at risk of Alzheimer's disease or heart disease. How is your body functioning at that state? And can we revert you as you age and maintain that optimal function of the immune system so that you're clearing self-waste, so that you're fighting inflammation internally? That's what I'm most excited about. Can we harness the power of the immune system to control our inflammation? If we can do that, we really will be able to tackle all the diseases of aging by tackling aging, right? Because when we say that, it sounds ethereal, right? Oh, you're not gonna be old. And people go, what does that mean? You have to be old. What it means is like, there was a time when your system was working perfectly. And if we understand how you did that, and I think that it all leads back to the immune system, if we understand how, when the car was really great, and of course that can be with organ replacement, or it can be maybe potentially protein replacement or hormone replacement or telomere replacement. I'm excited about the immune system fighting inflammation, the immune system fighting oxidative stress, and getting you to function at the level you were meant to function at your optimal state. That excites me. And then you can point it to all the diseases of aging.
I also wanted to cover clotho, that we also spoke about it briefly. As clotho is a protein that has multiple protective effects in different tissues in the body. One of the forms of clotho is circulating in the blood. And interestingly, the levels of clotho decline as we age. So some have suggested that clotho is a rejuvenation factor. In addition to the neurology indications, what other effects can clotho be a therapy in? For example, obesity, cancer. What are you exploring at ADvantage?
Well, at ADvantage, and of course, with the guidance of Dr. Kuruo, who's on our SAB, who discovered the protein, and Dr. Abraham, who's our chief science officer, these are the world's top clotho experts. They just are. So we're exploring the protein very deeply. I think the question you ask has twofold. Scientifically, we're exploring it all and learning it all. As a corporate decision, we have to pick indications, right? And longevity is longevity. Obesity is an indication that we've talked about. It has a lot of competition. Cancer, Alzheimer's, of course. One of the primary functions of clotho is energy metabolism. In that sense, the way it triggers energy metabolism, it definitely seems to help with obesity. In every model that it's tried, in any animal model, even if it's a cancer model or a kidney model, the animals lose weight, and they lose healthy weight. They lose body fat, and they don't lose skeletal muscle. So I think that's a very exciting property of clotho. But again, as you dive deeper, it has this organ protective qualities. It does have tumor suppressing qualities. So could you point it to oncology? I think you could. And we have a model, a pancreatic cancer model that Dr. Abraham ran, where we see complete suppression of the tumor at the right dose. For us, again, because we started with Alzheimer's, we're really excited about pointing it to Alzheimer's, but we have something that can be pointed in so many different ways, and it's our responsibility to figure out where we go first. The beauty of clotho, as you mentioned, is just having this level in the serum triggers this pleiotropic effect. There's just so many things going on. And we've also discussed, like, well, why don't we just why don't we just work on raising the serum level? We know this has so many beneficial effects. So we can talk about the potentials of it. I think they're endless. I mean, it's tied to reproductive health. It's tied to diminished ovarian reserves. Young women with diminished ovarian reserves have clotho deficiency. Obese young children have clotho deficiency. Cancer patients have severe clotho deficiency. Severe clotho deficiency.
Maybe a quick parenthesis on clotho as a biomarker. How easy is it to measure your clotho levels? I guess you can't just go to Quest lab and order your clotho. Is it a complicated test?
Yeah, it shouldn't be complicated. This is a very young molecule, right? So it was discovered 27 years ago or something like this, and it seems like a long time for you. That's very young. For young people, they're like, that's my whole life. But in science, it's not a long time. In science, it's not a long time. The past 27 years since Makoto Kuruo discovered it has been learning about the molecule. So, scientists have been learning for 20 years. That's not a long time in the space of science. So there isn't broad sort of adoption of clotho diagnosis. They could do it. It is as easy as a blood test. And there are labs that specialize in it. And Quest should offer it. I'm not sure that they do now. But yeah, it's really just a blood draw. It's a simple blood draw, and you can test it in your serum.
Talking about clotho protein replacement, since clotho is a protein that declines with age, maybe an obvious step is to replace the protein with more exogenous protein. You synthesize in a lab. What's the difference in ADvantage compared to this protein replacement approach?
Yeah, we looked at that. So protein replacement seems good, right? Seems okay. You get the protein high in the serum. The main problem is that the half-life is very short. So you probably need to inject yourself twice a day to keep your levels where you're at. And also the real where you see the inflection point with clotho is at least at 2x, right? 3x. You need the 10%, 15% increase is not really enough to trigger the whole cascade of clotho. So how much protein do you need? And you can do it with protein, but you'd have to inject yourself a lot. There's also been difficulties manufacturing protein. It's a big protein. I think the manufacturing can always be solved by pharma, but so far it's been hard to solve, as it always is. And having consistent batches has been difficult. Producing the protein in a consistent way has been difficult. And even when that is solved, if it's ever solved, the half-life of the protein is a problem. The half-life is very, very short. So we landed at inducing endogenous clotho production with mRNA, with an exogenous mRNA. And we've created our own proprietary mRNA that produces twice as much for twice as long compared to the native mRNA. So we're solving for that half-life issue. We're solving for that quantity issue. And we can see that we can, control it by dosage very, very well. You don't want to go too high. You definitely don't want to go low. We can achieve that in a pretty effective way with our mRNA construct.
To summarize, in order to tackle these challenges associated with the production of recombinant clotho protein, ADvantage has decided to go into the gene therapy approach with mRNA gene therapy to make your own body produce the clotho that it should be producing and by itself.
Yeah, that's right.
And so what is the next milestone in these clotho treatments? I understand you're doing preclinical experiments, both guided with Dr. Abraham, which is an expert in neurodegeneration and clotho, and Dr. Kuroho, who actually discovered clotho, works in Japan. So what is the next milestone with this?
Well, our next, our biggest milestone is the phase 1 trial, right? So we have extensive preclinical data now, and we have our eyes set on a phase 1, really. We want to prove the safety and maybe look at the blood sera level, which is easy to look at, and see the expression that we're seeing in animals. And we're working towards that. In between there and here, and that's not very far away. It's actually very close. But in between that, there are some exciting things we can do as well in the preclinical space. Dr. Kuro wants to put it in a hemodialysis model. He has a pig model for severe kidney disease, chronic kidney disease. Dr. Abraham is also discussing some of the cancer models that we can do preclinical. So we have some smaller and very exciting milestones in the preclinical space as we build towards the phase 1. And of course, the phase 1 is the most exciting. We're maybe a year away from that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I think it is amazing. I don't want to be quoted because it may end up being 2 years.
Yeah, we don't want to jinx it.
Yeah, we don't want to jinx it. But that's what we're working on. We're phase 1 with our mRNA.
Are you expecting to run these clinical trials in the UK or perhaps in the US, or it depends?
It does depend, and we're having conversations with the regulatory agencies now, and I think wherever we find a robust regulatory agency that embraces us quickest, because we really want to get a handle on the safety of this. We see it very safe in animals right now. When we go into phase 2 and deeper trials, then we probably would have an affinity for the US or the UK. But I think the phase 1, as long as it's a respected agency and we can have a robust protocol, I'm open. I mean, the team is open.
Agustin, I think it would be really interesting to hear about your personal background, and perhaps you can share about your training as a molecular biologist, and then in the entertainment industry, and in other organizations that have complemented your background as a biotech executive.
Yeah. So, and we talked about it earlier, Jose, early on as a kid. I mean, at 17 years old, I signed up to the Marine Corps, and I did a short stint there. I'm super proud of that experience. Of course, it gave me a lot of discipline, and it taught me I didn't want to dig ditches for a living, but I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of that. And then, yeah, I primarily was an entertainment executive. Let me explain to you what a film producer does, right? So a film producer finds a piece of IP that they find very compelling. I love this IP. I want to develop it. And then they hire the best people in the best disciplines to develop that IP. They have to raise a lot of money to develop that IP, to pay the best cameraman, the best actors, the best music person, the best costume designer. And you manufacture this IP, right? Then you market the IP and you exit from the IP. So it's actually very linear, and you learn very quickly that you need really good team. You need culture on a team to get the product done. You need to be able to handle large amounts of money in a very disciplined way. So hiring the best people, motivating enough people to support it financially and with their time, staying on mission, creating a good team culture to stay on mission, get the best IP possible, know where to cut, know what to leave, get 60 hours of footage and end up with a 90-minute movie. That means leaving a lot on the editing room floor. So, sounds a lot like science, right? So when you start doing science, the principles, I think, are fungible. I think the principles are the same. Drug development is more regulated, so you do have a learning curve, and you bring in the best regulatory experts, right? The learning curve is that, but the application of science is not very different to the production of art. And moreover, I will say the best scientists I've met, and I think I've met some of the best in the world, and I'm lucky enough to be collaborating with really the best in the world. They're artists. They're absolutely artists. And amazing biologists. There are great scholars that know everything that's been written. And then there's a Rudy Tanzi who imagines things that nobody else has seen. Like a Dr. Abraham, a Dr. Kuro, who say, I'm looking at all this stuff that everybody knows. And there must be something else. I want to go research it. The really brilliant scientists, allow themselves to think creatively and still apply the rigors of scholar and science, right? They haven't, the hypothesis, the theory comes from a crazy creative mind, you know? And then they apply the scientific principle to their idea. That's the discipline. But if you don't have the ability to see things people can't see, you're not making the great leaps in science that we see some of the greats make. So recognizing who those people are, I think that's a skill I brought over from working in the entertainment industry, right?
What I'm hearing is that the most important aspect is team building, setting the vision for the project, and obviously resource allocation to optimize resources. Can you maybe share some of the insights that you've learned with your work on rational vaccines, on clinical trial design, for example, for the herpes vaccines?
I think the best lessons I learned around clinical trial design, of course, but just, drug development is if all the best minds in the world have been at it and haven't solved it, there's a time to bring those people together and ask the question, like, maybe we should look at this problem in a different way. And so I think asking the question, like, okay, how do we do this differently? Because the approaches have failed. I think it's a good question to ask. And then, like we said, apply the scientific method to your hypothesis, but give yourself the freedom to ask the questions that maybe nobody else is asking. I think, it's a broad lesson. I'm not being specific, but I think it's an important lesson. I think it's an important lesson.
No, it is indeed, and thank you for sharing. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me. And I would like to ask you one final question. What is the best advice that you have ever received?
Can I do two answers?
Of course.
So I think the best advice, hands down, is from my dad, right? And my dad's not a scientist, but I think the things that he always drilled into my head is like, make sure you do everything with honor, everything honorably. And that means telling the truth, living your truth, and facing up to whatever that is. I think if you can apply that in your relationships with people, in your relationships with colleagues, if you ask yourself, is this the honorable thing to do? Even if you have to fire somebody, right? Even if you have to fight somebody, you can fight with honor, right? And I think that applies to everything. And
Absolutely.
I try to have it color everything I do. And I guess the second part of the question, I meant it to be funny, but now that I think about it, it's the same thing. I read this book called The Book of the Samurai.
Okay.
It has all these funny passages in it, although it's called Hagakure, but it has one passage that says, if you're ever caught in a rainstorm, resign to getting wet. It's better to accept that you're going to get wet than to go along trying to hide under every roof and shingle and trying to escape the rain, because you're going to lose your dignity. You're going to be wet anyway. You're going to get wet no matter what you do. But if you just walk down the middle of the street and accept that you're going to get wet, at least you don't lose your dignity. Which again goes back to my dad's advice. Just try to do everything with honor. And when you're developing a drug, when you're doing biotech, when you're making a movie, or when you're just living life, there are rainstorms. There are big rainstorms. And I think if you can say, hey, this is going to be uncomfortable. There's going to be moments when I'm going to get wet. And when I come up on those moments, what is the most honorable thing to do? I had an experiment where the data wasn't exactly what I thought it should be. There's still an honorable, don't try to cherry pick your data, right? You're just wrong here. Do something else. I think if you can apply that principle, like what's honorable at every step, you're gonna have an easier time dealing with the rain showers, I think.
Absolutely, it all makes sense. So, Agustin, thank you again for joining me in this interview, and we look forward to seeing the clinical trial results on both AD04 and Clotho. All the best.
Thank you for letting me talk so much, man. I hope it wasn't too much.
No, it's great. Thank you. Hi again. If you found this video interesting and would like more people to see this kind of content, consider clicking the like button and subscribing to our channel. Thank you for listening.